una injusticia! Una injusticia! Una grande injusticia!
She screams injustice after her husband was placed on an expedited deportation order after showing up to his immigration check-in in Miami.
Crying out, "I don't want to die in Honduras," an emotional mother taken by ICE agents at immigration court.
It's ordered the deportation of 500,000 Cuban, Venezuelan, and Haitian immigrants that came here the right way. And my question for my fellow Cubans is, are y'all still feeling special? My entire childhood was spent being fed the narrative that our family came here the right way and that everybody else that's complaining about being deported, well, they just need to go back to where they came from, start the process over legally. I don't want to ever hear another Cuban American say some shit like that ever again. I'm going to laugh in your face. Maybe you all will finally realize that no matter how much you try to blend into white Western European culture, no matter how much you try to pretend that you don't eat ham croquettes for breakfast and that you've never had ajiaco for dinner in your entire life, the problem is that Donald Trump is never going to see you as human.
I always find it interesting seeing how so many people from Latin America are clueless about how racism works in America. Too many of these people are very disrespectful towards freedmen Black Americans when they choose to migrate to America. If it was not for our ancestors pushing for the 1965 Immigration Act, these same immigrants would not be able to even enter the United States. They are quick to team up with white supremacy and spew their anti-Blackness that is heavily rooted in the Latin American culture towards Black Americans. What Trump is doing with this ICE deportations is way overdue. Well, as you are about to see in upcoming videos, many of these immigrants are getting their wake-up calls in a major way.
NBC6 was there as person after person left Miami's immigration court in tears Thursday. Yanet Correa could not hold back her pain.
Una injusticia! Una injusticia! Una grande injusticia!
She screams injustice after her husband was placed on an expedited deportation order after showing up to his immigration check-in in Miami. The detentions are not only creating panic and fear, but Correa's immigration attorney tells NBC6 it's also creating confusion.
When a
person enters the U.S. at the border, they decide what law to process you under. And now here in court, they're deciding to process you under a different law.
Immigration court attorney Antonio Ramos tells us this is now the new normal.
What I have been seeing is out of the few people, most of them, they have crimes, previous crimes, and sometimes not even have applied in front of the judge with any application, just an open case. And we have seen just a couple of cases. They have no crime, but the issue was they never filed an application before the judge.
As the detention of immigrants with what's known as the I-220A form continues, Ramos explained what's been happening inside the court.
People get in front of the judge. The DHS offered dismissal of the case. And I have to make a parenthesis because dismissal of the case in the previous administration, people saw it as a good thing because they're not going to be arrested. So a lot of people accept the dismissal. When they accept the dismissal, they withdraw the application in front of the judge. The case is closed in front of the judge. They are literally in a legal limbo and they can be detained. And that's what's going on.
Julissa Hernandez panicked when she saw that her husband's check-in took longer than expected.
I saw that they were taking a man who was outside here with me. And I look and they just took him. I collapsed. I felt that I couldn't go on anymore.
Her husband was eventually released, but now she's worried about what will happen to her when she shows up for her own immigration check-in next week.
Crying out, "I don't want to die in Honduras," an emotional mother taken by ICE agents at immigration court Thursday. Another mother also placed in the same van. Her husband says she has no prior criminal history. But like most arrested, she had just had her case dismissed by a judge.
We were requesting a merits hearing, and the judge declined to set a merits hearing because DHS asked for the case to be dismissed and the client to be ordered removed, saying that it was not in the government's interest to hear a full case.
These videos shared to us show agents in the lobby of the immigration court waiting for migrants, one agent even holding what appears to be a list with pictures. Shortly after, you see agents escort an entire family into a charter bus. ICE says these arrests are a part of the Trump administration's plans to reverse former President Biden's so-called catch and release program. They are now utilizing expedited removals. It allows them to fast-track deportations for people who have been in the country for less than 2 years. These arrests are evoking fear among people who have upcoming hearings. One attorney who's representing a man from Central Africa says the option for migrants to appear virtually for hearings appears to be gone. Her client also had his case dismissed.
I feel like we portraying people who is here with credible fears. Just knowing his story, I feel like I let him down.
But ICE wasn't just at immigration court Thursday. Our cameras capturing agents and state troopers taking 3 undocumented migrants who appear to be landscapers into custody at a shopping center. ICE officials wouldn't tell us their nationalities or if they face any other criminal charges beyond entering the country illegally.
Many migrants are fearful to show up to immigration court. However, if they don't, a judge could rule they be immediately deported. EC's Henry, this all started this morning when 2 charter buses showed up outside immigration court. Among those detained, a Cuban man who was meeting with an attorney.
When he got out of the car, they called him by his name, and they were there waiting for him. My son had an appointment with an attorney, and they took him without any explanation or anything.
A mother distraught after her 21-year-old son was taken away by ICE. She says he came to the U.S. from Cuba 9 months ago.
Her kids crying, families, it's sad.
He is just one of dozens of people taken into custody Wednesday outside the immigration court. The news of the arrest even drawing a small protest. But an ICE spokesperson told us in his statement they are reversing former President Biden's so-called catch and release policy and removing undocumented migrants who have come into the country in the last few years unless they have a valid, credible fear claim.
They are doing this not just to make it harder for people to get away, but also to boost the number of deportations.
San Antonio-based immigration attorney Carlos Castañeda is frustrated. In 2021, the Biden administration scaled back on immigration arrests at courthouses. Now Castañeda says his clients are fearful to show up to hearings.
I have to tell people, even though you have a great case, you may still be treated wrongly.
Castañeda says in some cases, ICE is arresting people after a judge dismisses their cases, therefore removing their temporary protected status. But he says yesterday one of his colleagues' clients had an open case and was still taken into custody.
Despite having an open court case, leaving the court, they were still arrested in the lobby of the courthouse, the immigration court in San Antonio. They do not care about the judges.
Like any place, there are some good and bad people anywhere you go. I have traveled and lived in different countries. What I have seen is that many countries, whether they are Latin, Asian, European, etc., racist behaviors are mainly covert actions, activities that are hidden or concealed, or overt actions, activities that are open, more in your face. Years ago, as I was on my journey of learning Spanish language, I used to watch several Spanish TV programs such as Sábado Gigante, Despierta America, 12 Corazones, and Primera Impacto, etc. While watching these shows through the years, I began to notice that these shows rarely, or if at all, had Afro-Latin people on the shows as host of shows or news anchors. That's when I started looking into the history of Latin American countries. On this Mahogany Culture and Travel channel, I have done a video about the history of Black people in Mexico that you can look at, that speaks further on the ancient history of Afro-Mexicans. Since the 1910 Mexican Revolution, people of African descent in Mexico were largely excluded from official documentation and national identity. In Mexico, there is a popular expression of mejorar la raza, a phrase that is used in Latin American countries, which means improve the race. It implies that you should marry or have children with a whiter person so you'll have better-looking kids. La Raza has historically been used to refer to the mixed-race populations, primarily, though not always exclusively in the Western Hemisphere. For over a century, Mexico maintained a racial ideology known as mestizaje, which promoted the idea of a mixed-race national identity that primarily included indigenous and Spanish ancestry. This ideology effectively erased the presence and contributions of Afro-Mexicans from the country's history and identity. It was not until 2015 that Mexico officially recognized Black Mexicans as citizens of Mexico in a national census, acknowledging them as citizens with distinct Afro-descendant heritage. This was a significant milestone, as it allowed for Afro-Mexicans to be counted in demographic data, leading to a greater push for their rights and inclusion in national policies. However, racism and colorism remain major issues across Latin America, including in Mexico, Brazil, Honduras, Venezuela, and other countries. Many Latin American nations have deeply ingrained anti-Black biases due to their colonial histories, where African enslavement was brought in to work on plantations, mines, and other labor-intensive industries. Despite the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, racial hierarchies persisted, favoring lighter-skinned individuals and reinforcing discrimination against those of African descent. In many Latin American countries, a racial and social hierarchy exists where white or lighter-skinned individuals of Spanish descent hold the most power, wealth, and influence, while darker-skinned individuals, including Afro-descendants and indigenous people, often face systemic discrimination and economic marginalization. Although Mexico has an Afro-descendant population, the government historically confined them to certain regions, often keeping them out of national consciousness. The majority of Afro-Mexicans live in the states of Guerrero, Veracruz. Veracruz is a historic port city where enslaved Africans were brought. Oaxaca and Costa Chica, a coastal region spanning Guerrero and Oaxaca with high concentrations of Afro-Mexicans. These areas have historically been underdeveloped, with poor infrastructure, limited job opportunities, and a lack of government investment. The deliberate neglect of these communities has contributed to the continued marginalization of Black Mexicans. Many Afro-Mexicans in these regions have limited political representation, experience racial profiling, and face difficulties in accessing education and healthcare. In countries like Brazil, where the largest population of Afro-descendants outside Africa resides, systemic racism manifests in disparities in education, employment, and police violence. In Mexico, Afro-Mexicans have historically faced exclusion from political representation, economic opportunities, and social recognition. In Honduras, Garifuna communities, Afro-Indigenous peoples, have suffered from land displacement and violence. In Venezuela, despite a history of Black resistance, Afro-Venezuelans often experience discrimination in social and economic structures. Due to these systemic and cultural issues, Black travelers and expatriates should be cautious when visiting or moving to Latin American countries. While many regions are welcoming, the persistence of racism can affect access to services, treatment by authorities, and general safety. Racial profiling, economic disadvantages, and exclusion from opportunities can make it challenging for Black individuals to navigate these societies. Understanding the history of colonization and its lasting effects can help prepare those who plan to travel or relocate to Latin America, ensuring that they are aware of both the beauty and the challenges that come with experiencing these countries. Tell me what you think about this topic. Hope you find the information in this video informative. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Thanks for watching.